Brought to you by Hug House Productions.
Hi, hello, listener of Never Morphed. If you like this show, I am convinced you are going to love The Newest Olympian by Mike Schubert. Why am I so certain? Because that's one of the shows that inspired this show. Real ones who listen to the credits already know. Each week, Mike dives into the Percy Jackson series, which I love, joined by guests who are longtime fans of the Rick Riordan series. If you haven't read these books yet, this is the perfect way to get started and read along with Mike. They're so good. And like Animorphs, they're kids' books that touch on way more serious topics than you might expect. And they're about worldwide mythologies, starting with Greek and Roman. I know you gays love mythology. If you have already read the books and know how good they are, you'll love this series too. The dramatic irony, man. And if you know about the books from the Disney Plus series, Mike has done interviews and conversations with some of the cast of the show on The Newest Olympian too. Mike is a great host, a great editor, and obviously a huge inspiration for me. You can find The Newest Olympian in the show notes or wherever you get your podcasts. Go subscribe right now and enjoy. Welcome back to another episode of Nevermorph, a series in which I read every Animorphs book for the first time. As always, this podcast is about books for kids, but this podcast is definitely absolutely not for kids. Intro coming to you today from the shitty mic because I'm also managing our new baby puppy. Her name is Postina and she's perfect and she's an angel baby and I love her. But also, you'll get an intro on the good mic again when she's housebroken. Honestly, actually, it'll probably come before that. But listen, she's really a puppy. So, shitty mic today. And next time. But still. Anyway, we're about to jump into Book 9 with Adam Bumas, journalist and researcher at Garbage Day, Wired, and more, and a collaborator on one of my favorite podcasts of the year. Everyone knows that, The Search for Ulterior Motives. All of this will be linked in the show notes along with Adam's Blue Sky. But please, for real, check out Everyone Knows That. It rules. It's an investigative limited series, one of my favorite forms in the medium, all about a piece of lost media found after years of searching. Where was it found? Some porn in the 80s. As always, you can find my notes, my live reaction audio, and our fantastic little Discord community over on our Patreon. You can now buy single notes documents or live reaction recordings if you don't want to deal with another subscription. You can find that at patreon.com/hughousepodz. Okay, let's get going. Adam Bumas, I am so excited to have you here with me to discuss, I think, our second Cassie book in the Animorphs series.
Wait, this isn't the Rhonda Byrne book? We aren't discussing the power of positive thinking? The secret?
I did not even connect The Secret, the book, to The Secret, this book. My God, thank God this is not that book.
Like, we're going to get into it soon. We're going to talk about, like, history with the series and so on. But I think the series would have a little bit more sort of cultural purchase if every book didn't have this sort of interchangeable one-word, very generic title.
Literally. So before I made this show, I fully did not even consider that the individual books had titles, which is absurd because they're books. I really thought it was going to be like Animorphs 1, Animorphs 2, like that's it. And so far, that is more or less still true. I honestly forgot this one was even called The Secret. That's not anything. That's not...
Like, there is a secret in the book, I guess, but you could say the exact same thing about every single other book because they're keeping it a secret from their parents that they're Animorphs.
Yeah, they won't tell us their last names or where they live. Like, I'm so glad you brought that up. I didn't even think about the title for this one. I was just in it. But yeah, let's talk about your history with Animorphs. I would love to know where you started with this series.
Sure. Well, I was an incredibly bookish kid. I was a real little nerd, and I would read basically anything I could get my hands on.
Mm-hmm.
And like that included a lot of stuff I was way too young for. The great example is I started reading the Hitchhiker's Guide books when I was 7, and I was way too young to get any of the jokes.
Yeah.
But also that was the real sort of activation point of like, oh, wow, you're allowed to write books about this?
Yeah. Yeah.
And Animorphs, it was always something that scared me off a little, I would say, because unlike something like, for example, Goosebumps or the Bailey School Kids or any of those other series with a million books, as you were saying, the books are very clearly numbered. They have a lot more active serialization.
Mm-hmm.
It's much more of a single united story, like a ongoing show or something, than it is just you can pick up one book and read it, even though obviously eventually I gave in because what was I going to do? Not read a book? And yeah, then I discovered, yeah, you can just kind of pick up one of these books and start wherever you want.
Yeah, totally. How old do you think you were when you first started reading them?
I would say it was a little later because, yeah, I was scared off when I was younger because each library I encountered, like my local library, the school libraries, they would only have like 5 or 6 of this series that, like, because I was growing up in the mid-late zeros, it was most of the way completed, and there were like 30 or 40 books by that point.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, that's so intimidating. That would have stressed me out way too bad. Of course, I say that, and now I'm literally doing it. In fairness, I did not know how many books there were before I committed to making this podcast, but I am here for the long haul. I am very excited that there are this many books. But when I was like in my youth, no, there's no way. That's so many books. That's such a commitment.
Yeah, and another thing for me personally is Animorphs, as I'm sure you can sympathize with, it's not something that comes up in your everyday life much.
Well, it does now.
Well, yeah, yes. Now it does. But yeah, like
yes.
There are so many book series that I read most or all of that I just sort of carry those around in my brain with me and have done so for the past couple decades. And like, I'm not sort of immediately prepared to like run the sprint without stretching first, without doing some reps, doing some practice laps. But there are a lot of comparable series where like I would love to go on a podcast and talk about the Time Warp Trio or the Zack Files. Like the Zack Files is one I want to sort of single out because this summer, a question I've been asking a lot of people because I'm really interested in culture, in how things progress, in how people remember things further on, especially when it comes to like the internet and 21st century stuff. Yeah, this summer I've been asking a lot of people, what is your pink opaque?
Oh, that is such a good question. Oh my God. I know what mine is immediately off the bat.
And like the coolest thing about the question is every single time I ask it, I've gotten a different answer. So I'd love to hear yours.
Yeah, mine is so weird. It was a Disney Channel TV show that me and another girl who was a friend in my neighborhood watched together, and I don't think anyone else ever watched it. It was like a vaguely witchy girl who was like obsessed with the paranormal. Her mom was in a rock band. They lived in her tour van and would basically go across the country. And every time they would stop, they would encounter some sort of like paranormal situation going on, and she would blog about it. This really explains, I think, everything about who I am right now.
What is the show called? It sounds great.
It's called So Weird. Yes.
I recognize that name, but I had no idea that's what it was about.
Yeah, it's on Disney Plus now, it feels like weird. Like it doesn't feel like it should be allowed on there for some reason.
Which is something they explicitly discuss in I Saw the TV Glow.
Yes. What is your pink opaque?
It was the Zack Files. The Zack Files
yes.
was this series of books. It was by an author named Daniel Greenberg, and the main character was a fictionalized version of his son, who was just like this regular kid who lived on the Upper West Side. But in every book, he would go on not just supernatural adventures, but this is crucial, funny supernatural adventures. There would always be like some element of like grade school satire or jokes or like some silly idea to it. And they turned it into a TV show in Canada. So they got rid of the New York stuff, which I was a little annoyed with. They got rid of the Jewish stuff too, but that was never as big of a focus. But they still were pretty faithful about like taking the characters I liked from the books and like tweaking them enough so they could sort of fit to the kids show standards. And they made a couple seasons of it, and they were some of the very first things I got when our family signed up to Netflix DVD in the mid-zeros.
Yes. Oh, the beautiful golden days. I know somebody who still subscribed to the physical DVD service of Netflix.
Oh, you mean Quickster?
No, I mean literally still Netflix.
They changed Netflix DVD. They changed its name to Quickster for a few years.
No, I had no idea. Oh, that's so bizarre.
That is something I enjoy doing because I have to write about the internet and tech and companies and all that. And they keep changing their names to new, stupider names. And I never get tired of using the stupider names. Obviously, the king of that is calling it X. But
yes, of course.
But yeah, like I have a nice frisson of excitement whenever I get to say Quibi.
Oh, Quibi. I should ask, though, while we're on the topic of shows, did you watch the Animorphs TV show at all?
I basically didn't know it existed until like I got access to Wikipedia.
Nobody has watched this show.
I only know the Zack Files show existed because like a couple of the books I checked out of the library had like now a TV series on it.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
And I don't think any of the Animorphs books copies that I had access to said now a TV show on it.
No, it doesn't look like there was a lot of, I mean, marketing in general, but like even on the books themselves, like I haven't seen much of anything. The marketing for the show just overall seems terrible. I tuned into the first episode and I loved it. And then I never watched again and I never read any of the books. And then at some point, the show got put up on Netflix for a short time, I believe. And I think that I did watch it all, I think. And I remember absolutely nothing from it.
Oh, well. Did they get any big names to be on it?
I think that the guy who plays Jake is someone. The guy who plays Axe was in Josie and the Pussycats, which is a very big deal to me.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, he's in Josie and the Pussycats. He is their manager.
Oh, yeah, okay.
Yeah.
I'm sort of imagining what I would expect the Animorph show to be like. And honestly, what I'm imagining is Sliders. Just like Sliders with some animals in it sometimes.
Yeah, pretty much. One thing that I thought was going to be really funny is I do live reactions when I read most of the books. So I'll literally sit down and read the book, record the audio the entire time I'm reading the book, and then I'll like edit it down and delete silences and everything. And to differentiate between chapters, I was like, oh, this is so funny. I'm going to pull a sound clip from the theme song because I remember the theme song very distinctly because it's like so of its time and so over the top.
How so?
It goes, no turning back, no backing down.
Oh, that kind of theme song. Okay.
Yes. And I took the snippet of him singing that very aggressively and I like used that to benchmark between chapters. And after recording enough episodes of this podcast and finding out that nobody watched the show, I'm now looking back on all those live reacts being like, oh, okay, so nobody nobody gets what I was doing there. And it just sounds crazy. And there's just like a man yelling between me and my dumb little voice. Like, I really thought like people would have big memories of watching the TV show, and literally I don't think a single person I've had on as a guest like actually sat down and watched it on purpose regularly. So, should we dive in to this book?
Sure, yeah, let's get into it.
I'm very excited because the first Cassie book that we read on the show, or also the first Cassie book that exists, is number 4, which I did not like one bit. I did not like the book. I did not like Cassie. There were whales in it, and I am very, 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 very scared of whales. They're too big.
Oh, intriguing.
Yes.
Don't come to the Museum of Natural History if you're here in New York.
Oh, absolutely not. I've been in it. It's so scary. I don't like it. It's not for me. Yeah, I have like 2 really specific phobias. One is whales, and the other is I have trypophobia. So when I saw that, when I saw that,
and
this
the
book
sort of
has
baleen,
termites.
the baleen that could hit it off for you.
Ooh, yeah, don't like that. Don't like that. Yeah, I really was expecting a different kind of termite horror than we got. So I guess I'm grateful.
No, that's the best stuff. I was like, oh wow, I did not expect Animorphs to go this hard.
Yes. Okay, so all of this being said, I was really hesitant about this book. It's our first return to Cassie since a book that I did not like. And I actually really enjoyed this. How was your experience reading this book, first of all?
Well, like I'm saying, there's still some part of my memory that like instead of my friends' birthdays or whatever carries around all the vital information about all these book series I read. Mm-hmm. And so, yeah, it was just like sort of getting back in the tub, just like, oh yeah, Cassie and Rachel and Jake and Axe, who calls him Prince Jake. Yeah.
Yes. Very good. Very good. How did you enjoy it? Did you like this one? Was it fun to come back to?
It was a nice YA book. I thought it was really well done, and I thought it was a really good character piece for Cassie in particular.
Totally. I really, really love her arc here. And I think one of the things that has kept me distant from Cassie until now is that philosophically, we are not terribly aligned on a lot. I am very much like I'm a Rachel. Like I'm a Rachel and a Marco. So sometimes Cassie's passiveness can really get to me. But in this book, we were so philosophically aligned. It felt great. I was like, okay, now I understand Cassie. Now I get what she's up to. I really enjoyed this one. So jumping into chapter 1, we have like our typical Animorphs info dump up front. She's saying, I'm not going to tell you my last name, et cetera, et cetera. Not going to tell you where we live, even though I think I have
a note about this later. I have a note about this.
Okay, because I'm on a quest to figure out where these books are based, and I keep flip-flopping which coast I think they're on.
Yeah, I have a note about that'll become more salient later.
Oh, I'm so excited. So they are in the science lab. It's Cassie and Rachel in the science lab because Cassie is doing extra credit because her grades are tanking. She has a D right now, which I found very shocking for Cassie.
I guess it makes sense given how little time these characters would conceivably have to spend on schoolwork.
Yeah, absolutely. Their lives sound so horrifically exhausting to me.
And yeah, it's like some students get D's even when they don't have to be Animorphs.
Yeah, very true.
I didn't go that badly ever, I think, but I got some low C's and C minuses. Yeah, and I wasn't an Animorph as much.
Yeah.
And that's the story I'm sticking to on this podcast.
Oh, right. Yes. Yeah. Not an Animorph. Wink, wink. So Cassie is doing this makeup bonus work with these mice in this lab. She's trying to get
Rats,
this mouse.
not mice.
Rats. You're right. Thank you. It is rats, which is an important distinction. I love rats. I don't care for mice.
Oh, what would you say makes you more interested in rats than mice?
I think about rats and mice the way that I think about pigeons and doves a lot, where like people seem to think that like doves are so beautiful and so clean and pure and intelligent and wise. But actually all of those things are true about pigeons, and doves are boring looking and dumb as hell. I think of the same with rats. People are like, oh, rats are disgusting and they're stupid and they're creepy and scary and gross. And I think that that's mice. Rats are so intelligent. They're so affectionate. They're so sweet. They're clean and good. And I love rats.
Have you heard about the city's war on rats and the rat czar and so on?
Oh, like it, yes. But please do tell regardless, because it's a very fun story.
Yeah, at the moment we're recording this, the mayor, Eric Adams, who may not be the mayor for much longer, one of his big initiatives is trying to fight rats and pestilence in general in the city. And so the big move to that is putting trash in trash bins instead of having trash bags sort of be on the street, which it has benefits, it has drawbacks. That's another podcast.
Yeah.
But the point is he's selling it as a war on rats, and he appointed someone in the government to be the rat czar. And they've done all these public awareness campaigns about like sending the rats packing, fighting the rats, getting them out of the city. And there are all these weird public appearances he's done where like he comes out as Empire State of Mind plays and throws something in a trash bin.
Yes. So I am not in the city. And yet I am still absolutely obsessed with Eric Adams. He is so truly, genuinely beguiling. What a little freak of a man.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
So bizarre. And it's like I have to keep reminding myself, like, no, he's genuinely like bad. Like, this is not good. This is not good what he is doing to the city. But then there's the other part of my brain that's like, I can't look away from him. Like, every word he says is incorrect somehow. Like, just nothing makes sense the way that it should. He's so bizarre. What times we live in. I must ask, why the hell did she name this rat Courtney?
I vaguely assume Courtney Love.
Oh, okay. I did not even make that connection at all, and so I was just looking at it like.
Well, like at the beginning of the next chapter, we'll get to that, but there is just like body blows of it is the mid-90s.
Yes, so true. So I love when books do that.
It just like a sine wave. It just like no matter which way you turn, it is the mid-90s. I wrote everything down. We'll get to it.
Oh, I'm so stoked. So this rat Courtney is not making its way through Cassie's maze like she was hoping, and she doesn't understand why. So she and Rachel decide that they are going to morph into her and find out why she's not running through the maze, because maybe something is wrong. So they get her DNA and they morph into her, and that's basically chapter 1.
Well, like the important thing, I think, is that they do morph into the rat. They figure out the problem, and then some random boys from school come in and think they're gonna have some fun attacking these rats.
Yeah, what the hell? So yeah, in chapter 2, Cassie figures out that the mouse, basically the wind is blowing the smell of the treat at the end of the maze away, and that's why the mouse isn't running it. And then these boys come in and they're just like, I would like to kill a creature. I see it. I'll kill the creature. What the hell? This, I don't feel like, and maybe I am misremembering, I do not feel like often teenage boys were just like, I am going to do violence to a small creature in my high school.
Yeah, the in school, in an unused classroom, in an empty classroom, and you would just encounter some rats. Like, I think the reaction would be, I'm going to get my parents to complain to the school that like the janitors are slacking on the job or something.
Right. Or like, I don't know, like I'll capture this and go scare somebody with it. Like at worst, I don't think killing it is absolutely wild.
Like
they live in hell.
It's very much like a YA book thing. Like you kind of have to cram everything into the opening so you get the full picture of like what they can do, what the scope of like their capabilities and abilities are, how they react under pressure in a crisis, the way they're going to later. And like, yeah, I do understand that. Does this ever come back in future books to your knowledge?
I don't know. I've only read up until 9, but I do think I think that what's going on here is setting up one of the themes in like a really nice sort of subtle way. Because what this book largely discusses is essentially like how we value life. And,
oh, absolutely.
Right. And like how we value life based on aesthetic preferences, essentially. And with these boys coming in and being like, oh, it's a rat, it's a pest. Therefore, it's totally normal if I kill it to death. And, I think that if it were mice, we probably wouldn't have this in the same way that we wouldn't with pigeons and doves. So I did not pick up on that when I first read this book, but like now having seen the themes and where they go, I think this was a really nice introduction to it.
I wonder how it would be if it was a janitor instead. And there was like the kind of antics that you get with like the chef in The Little Mermaid or whatever, or Ratatouille, that kind of thing.
Oh, yeah. Wow, that would have been way less horrific, I feel. Maybe it would have been more.
Well, like there's some horror in this. It's also setting you up for that.
Yes, that's so true. Yeah, this book goes. It's funny to talk about this book because for context, the last several books have done something that has like revealed something new about this like horrible universe that they live in. Like we've gotten the Elemist introduced. We've gotten bizarre like time shenanigans. We've gotten Visser 1 on top of Visser 3. We got our first Axe book. And we got the Yerk in Jake's head being war crimed to death. And this book is so relatively chill. It was really nice. Like we didn't have any like massive, colossal, big information about how the world works. There was nothing that made me go, hey, what the fuck was that? That being said.
Well, like, and to sort of go much further ahead, the ending is kind of Visser 3 getting a pie in the face.
Oh yeah, it's awesome. It rules. It's so good. So yeah, like it's funny to talk about this going so hard on horror when in context, it's like a much lower stakes book. But when it goes, it really does go. It really does. Luckily early on here though, it's fine. It's chill. These boys attempt murder. And Rachel and Cassie decide that they are going to crawl up this boy's the boy's pant legs and bite so that Courtney can get away. And it works. And they demorph.
and act like everything is normal. And that's kind of that on those first 2 chapters for me.
Yeah, it's pretty episodic.
Totally. We then go into chapter 3, where we have a classic Animorph meetup at the barn, which I love. I love that they've got this like cute little HQ and that it's filled with animals. I think it's great. I've started growing very fond of this barn.
Oh,
like,
yeah, definitely.
Anytime they're in it, I'm like, I get that like warm, nice feeling like when I go back to like Skyhold in Dragon Age, or when I'm back on the ship in Mass Effect, like that kind of like, coming home kind of feeling.
You go back to Ezio Auditore's Italian villa.
Yes.
Yeah, we can just keep naming bases in video games all day. Black Mesa East. Oh boy.
I haven't played the Assassin's Creed games in so long. I would say that I should do that again. Maybe I should.
They keep coming out with more. The most recent one I played was Origins, the ancient Egypt ones.
Oh yeah, how
where
was
you get
that?
to sort of surf down the Great Pyramids. That one was a lot of fun.
Nice. Yeah, we also have a Dragon Age podcast at Hug House.
Oh, okay.
Yes, and so I'm like I'm like trying to get in other games fast before Veilguard comes out, because it's going to completely devour me, and I know it's going to be a shit show, but this is my life. So at this barn, we have typical Animorphs goofing at each other.
And yeah, here's the list I wrote down. Like,
please.
Rachel is talking to Cassie, and within 2 paragraphs, she talks about Banana Republic, Express, Xena Warrior Princess, Lollapalooza, and Ralph Lauren.
So 90s. Like, I know that most of these brands, I think all of these brands, for the first time in a while, still exist, but they do not exist the way that they existed in the mid-90s. This was like peak.
Well, like, also there's Xena Warrior Princess.
Yes.
And there's Lollapalooza. Like, I vaguely assume that's still going.
Oh, I think that they brought it back a few years ago. I think that they had stopped it.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yes, especially now with all of these like really hyper-focused, vibe-based music festivals.
Exactly.
Yeah, like it was Lollapalooza's time to come back.
Yeah, anything that has like any level of like actual cultural meaning or memory or whatever.
Yes.
And the only reason they haven't tried like 50 new Woodstocks is because of 99.
Yeah, oh, totally. And honestly, I wouldn't be shocked if we see another at some point.
They're gonna silo it off. They're gonna do a new Woodstock, and they're gonna do a new Woodstock 99.
Getting my tickets to new 99 right now. Very excited. Yeah, also, Marco is fighting Jake about if Batman or Spider-Man would win in a fight. Marco is saying that Batman absolutely would not win against Spider-Man. And these two had this exact same conversation like 3 books ago.
Did it get resolved there?
No. And I do assume that this is intentional and that Marco just will not shut up about this until Jake says that he's right. Like, I don't even think that this is like a continuity error or a writing mistake. I fully believe that Marco just refuses to relent on this.
Yeah, and given that this was the 90s, this is sort of before Spider-Man like came into his full flower, before Tobey Maguire.
Were we in, I mean, this was, okay, so this book came out in 97. When did the first...
02.
Oh, for Spider-Man?
Yeah. They took a while to make it. This is really fun. Like, there are lots of podcasts going into the sort of history of the Spider-Man movies. A friend of mine who's a professional Spider-Man cosplayer actually hosted one. And because of that, I've learned a lot about how like James Cameron was going to make a Spider-Man movie for a while. for about 5 seconds, he was thinking of having Leo be Peter Parker, then
Weird.
Freddie Prinze Jr. is Peter Parker.
Weird.
Yeah.
Yeah, and this was so the first Tim Burton Batman came out in 89. So I'm guessing that Jake just like said the first thing that was like immediately relevant in his brain and is not actually married to this debate the way that Marco is.
Oh, yeah, clearly.
So Cassie also says, oh, wait, hold on. This is an important note. In every single episode of Nevermorphed so far, somebody brings up DC Comics or references DC Comics in some way. This is one of the first times that it just happens organically, other than the first time it was mentioned in their last fight. So we are 9 books in, and we have yet to go a book without referencing DC.
Sure, we got DC and we got Marvel. I'm sure we can like drag in Dark Horse or Image if we give it some elbow grease.
Yeah, these books are a real saga.
Yeah, there we go.
Yeah. There's also this tremendous line from Cassie as she is explaining, like introducing all of the other Animorphs for the readers. She says that Marco will tell a joke while he's bleeding and terrified and in pain. And I relate to that so hard. Marco has consistently been my favorite in all of these books. Easy. And he was on thin ice for a little while in this book. We'll get to it. But I think that this line pretty much sums up why he is exactly my favorite. I love a little jester, and I love a little jester who's going to make a joke even when everything is the worst it could possibly be. Do you remember having like a distinct favorite character when you were reading these growing up?
I wouldn't say I did. I would say that's something that was harder for me to retain since, like I say, I was reading all these series and they all had the squad of 3 to 6 kids with like complementary character traits. So as few of them got lost in the shuffle.
That totally makes sense. Yeah.
I think I could tell you like the names of the Time Warp Trio, but I couldn't tell you their characters.
Yeah. Yeah, I feel like a lot of just generally characters for children in that era were really interchangeable.
This is very much a book from Cassie's perspective about her.
Yeah.
And the rest of them are like, you can clearly see how they would each be able to support their own books, but they are there for Cassie's story.
Yeah. Yeah, I really like how the Applegates use characters in that way. They're very good at knowing what parts to spotlight and what parts to kind of play down so that the POV character can really take full view. And even like stylistically, this Cassie book, again, like stakes are lower, but it also felt like a much cozier read than a lot of the other books. And her first book did too. I like how they adapt pacing and stakes for each different kid. I feel like this did this really successfully. So Tobias shows up. They're all just kind of like shooting the shit. And then Tobias shows up saying that he and Axe have something to talk about, but Axe is keeping watch on something, so he's not joining in the barn. And the something that they want to talk about is a logging company, which is starting to operate in the forest where they do most of their animorphing. That is by the barn. And Cassie is obviously immediately furious. And this is when I was like, oh, Cassie and I are going to be on the same side here. Because everybody else kind of like doesn't take it that seriously. Cassie is taking it deeply seriously. And she points out, like, how did they get the permits for this? This is a national forest.
I like how immediately it's set up that, like, the Yeerks are doing this for a specific, like, tactical purpose. But
Right.
they are also like destroying these old growth forests, destroying all these habitats. And like, it's very tidily putting it past the sort of standard Captain Planet level of like how kids media dealt with pollution in the 90s and like deforestation and anti-conservation efforts.
Yeah.
Because it's getting into like, it's not just because they're evil. There is a specific reason they want this land cleared. There's a specific agenda to it that you have to engage with if you want to stop it. But also, that doesn't mean it's not sort of like pure evil.
Right. And like, it takes so many people to say yes to allow this to happen. And the fact that that many people can say yes is something that like we should really be thinking about. I loved the focus on the problem here being like systemic. And I love that she was talking about permits and things, because I feel like, you know, growing up, when you think about environmental activism, you think about chaining yourself to a tree so that they don't chop it down, right? And I'm not dismissing that form of activism. I think that that can go a long way, but also pointing out, like, how is the system allowing this to happen, especially when it shouldn't, if it's on something like protected land? Like, we can actually do the work to figure out who precisely said yes to this horse shit. I loved that perspective.
Yeah, how does this happen in the sense of how practically does it happen, not how morally does it happen?
Yeah. I vibed with this so hard. I am sure like some part of your journalist brain was also like, yeah, you look up that paperwork, yeah?
Oh yeah, absolutely. Except the way they do it is much more exciting than how I do it.
Yeah. Yeah, I feel you. So this logging company is, they're going to investigate. They're going to see what's going on. They think it's pretty obviously run by the Yerks because it's guarded by a force field, very normal. And it's also guarded by guards with machine guns, very normal. So clearly this is the Yerks. So now they have to figure out what do, how to get in, and what they're going to do once they're in there. Because they really don't know what they're up against. And because of the force field, they can't know what they're up against until they're like already close enough to be in danger. So very interesting. I don't think we've worked with like quite such a black box yet in the series, which I love.
Yeah, it's a very standard story setup, and like the enemies have a secret base. 1, we got to get in. 2, we got to figure out what's going on inside. 3, we got to get rid of the secret base. We got to get them all out. And obviously there are a million different things you can do with that story, and I like how they're using it to thread through this like broader environmental thing.
Yeah. I also I love a stealth mission. I love a breaking into things mission. I love a spy mission, and we have they've like
this is something sort of related, like going back, nostalgia, things we grew up on. Do they ever use their morphing abilities to like morph into other humans and do Mission Impossible disguise stuff?
I genuinely thought that that's what was going on in this book for a while. They have not done that so far. I can only imagine that they do at some point, and I hope that they do. I thought what they were going to do is get the DNA of some of the human controllers who were patrolling outside of the logging station and do that thing. Just because, again, I like kind of misread a sentence. And then when they weren't, I was so disappointed. It's right there. It's right there, guys.
And yeah, it like here, I actually forget which comics company published it. I think it probably Dark Horse, but Nimona does that. She's a shapeshifter who does Mission Impossible stuff.
Yeah. Very good movie. Good job. Good job, team. I know you all worked so hard getting that movie made. What a delight and a very good comic.
Oh yeah, here I'll mention my
Yes.
note about the forest. At one point, like they turn into birds of prey. Cassie turns into an osprey, and Tobias is Tobias.
Yeah.
And they go off to the forest to investigate. And they specifically mention the forest has pines, oaks, and birches.
Yes.
And I can tell that's very specifically done to make it so you can't tell where it is, because like oaks and birches both grow basically everywhere in the country, and pines are a completely different kind of tree. Those are evergreen. They're not deciduous.
Yeah, they're conifers.
Yeah, so they could be literally anywhere in any forest, and they were very smart about listing the kind of trees that would enable that.
Yeah, it pissed me off. I don't know why this has become my like number one thing that I feel a need to guess correctly. I'm not going to, but I literally wrote down in my notes. I say doxing them. The national park has pines, oaks, birches. This sounds like every national park.
We're of the same mind. I think like where I come to this from is like a lot of my training is in like linguistics, basically. That's kind of how I come into this. And there are certain words that are dead giveaways. One of my favorite examples is, I wasn't sure if you were the kind of person I could bring this thing up to, but I think I can. Deltarune.
Yes.
The video game Deltarune. It's a video game. At one point, they're in a school, and the school has what they refer to as a bubbler.
Yes.
And there are only two places in the country that call what I call a water fountain a bubbler. And they're Milwaukee and New Hampshire. And want to guess where Toby Fox, who makes Deltarune, is from? He's from New Hampshire.
Of course he is. Of course. That's so funny. That's so specific.
So yeah, they investigate the base, and then they decide to sort of assault it, to like go in.
Yes. And they move pretty fast. They're observing it, and one thing that I think was really interesting is Marco asks in chapter 4 if Cassie is still like creeped out by morphing the way that the rest of them are, even though she's so good at it and so elegant. And she's like, yeah, no, it still creeps me out for sure, which is, again, some nice foreshadowing that comes up later. So at the logging station, Axe is, again, like kind of not present. He's like off watching something still. The rest of them are in bird form, and they're investigating. Not Tobias, because it's nighttime. And it's a it's a 2-story tall log building that looks like an old cabin. And I completely forgot this. In my head, this was definitely like a big warehouse concrete building. It's not. It's a cabin. There's no windows on the first floor. The second floor has dark tinted windows. And then there's spotlights mounted on top. Very normal. People walking around the perimeter. There's a man in a tan uniform and an automatic rifle. They can smell other Hork-Bajir and other humans around. Cassie notes that there might be some people who are guards who are not controllers, but I think that's dubious. And then they hear something circling around overhead, and then there's absolute chaos. The lights go on, Steel nets come down from the trees. They're being shot out with Dracon beams. And Cassie gets out from under the net, but Marco gets caught. Only because Axe shows up in the nick of time and swipes at the net with his terrifying tail does Marco get free. This chapter was so fine, and then it was so intense so fast.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. It really ramps up. And yeah, it's just very classical pacing in like the very classical story. It's like their first idea doesn't work. They have to think of something even sneakier and even more clever.
Totally. I love that the next chapter starts with Marco saying, okay, I think we've answered the question about whether that's just an ordinary logging camp. He's so funny. He is so funny. Constantly remains my favorite.
Yeah, you call it a cabin, but I was sort of imagining the building as like a ranger station, basically.
Oh, yeah. That makes sense. That makes sense, too. I think, again, growing up in Arizona, a lot of West Coast national park buildings were built so much later that they're usually not like made of logs. They're not like, they're usually really boring, like stucco sort of buildings is what I've seen. So I didn't even think about it.
Like in Arizona in particular, yeah, stucco makes sense.
Yeah, I forget that like there are places where plants like grow on purpose that aren't just cacti, and you can use different building materials and they won't crumble into dust. So they realize that this logging operation is really not about the logging. Going back to what you said about having this like specific motive and purpose for why they're logging and why they want the land cleared. Here, it's that they have a specific purpose of trying to trap them. They obviously knew that the Animorphs would come. They're encroaching on the Animorph territory. They know that. They think that they're all Andalites and that this is where their habitat on Earth is for the remaining Andalites. So, you know, they had the nets prepared. They were just like waiting for the moment to spring the trap. And this is when we start getting really the central theme of what's going on here. Cassie is listening to them all talk about this, and she is realizing that they only care about this because of how it impacts themselves and their mission. And Cassie is saying, like, why do we only care about it for that purpose? Like, this is a habitat. This is a national forest. There is life here and it matters. And nobody is siding with her. And it is so awful. Like, she's completely right.
Yeah, exactly. And it ties into the fact that, like, the barn is hers, the HQ is hers, because her parents run a like animal shelter. And so it makes sense that that would be a concern she just like immediately automatically has that the rest of them might not share.
Yeah. Even still, like, I think I'm just continually surprised, like Cassie, that most of the Animorphs have not like gained a deeper, real appreciation for nature or animals after having morphed into them. I think we have like Rachel loved the confidence of being a big ol' tomcat, and Jake loves the power of being a tiger, et cetera, et cetera. But like Cassie is the only one who seems tuned in on a bigger level than just the individual.
I would say from what I remember of the other books I've read that like there's a lot more emphasis on like the larger human situation, the larger like societal, cultural, I guess you could say, effect that the Yeerk invasion has and their mission in the other books. And I think you could view that as sort of Cassie's extension of that, because her culture, her sort of world, is a lot more connected to the animal world than any of the rest of them.
Yeah, definitely. I'm so like, she seems like such an obvious type of character for this story, but I'm consistently really grateful for the way that they included her. And I really like that it would be really easy to write Cassie as like pretty one note. Not to, I guess, not to pull on the turf books, but like Hermione, I think, is a pretty good example of like the kind of writing that we could have gotten for Cassie, where it's like activist and know-it-all, period. And that's so not what Cassie is. She's so reflective, and she can get angry about her views, but she's always like processing and thinking and reconsidering, and like she's very philosophical. She's constantly churning these ideas around in her head and finding out what makes sense to her and what ethics feel good to her. I don't think I've ever seen uh this kind of like real world ethical conundrum in a protagonist in a children's book, which could be because of what I've read, and also could be because I think, again, these books are just like exemplary.
Yeah, I think an important distinction between like Hermione and Harry Potter and so on is like Hermione is an activist for a made up cause defending made up creatures. And like animal advocacy, environmental advocacy are real things.
Yeah.
And adding a dimension of like the aliens are behind it, like you can do that to sort of heighten and exaggerate the debate, but it's still a real debate with a lot of nuance, and it means you can get way more involved with it, I think.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that there's so much more to pull on here. And even like because we look at Hermione and these made up creatures, and it's like very clearly an allegory for slavery that was not well written and not executed well. Whereas this, like, you don't have to really worry about the messiness of allegory. You can just like, yeah, dive into it, really talk about it, bring up things like permits, which Cassie does again, to emphasize like they need to get into that building. They need to see the paperwork, which I love.
Yeah, and there's a line that I wrote down in my notes. The Yeerks don't control the entire government. Not yet, anyway.
Yeah.
You gotta always like take a step or two back when someone says they control the government.
Uh-huh. Yeah. Yeah, I think that that's typically a red flag of a statement. Yeah.
And like especially when they're sort of like insidiously controlling people to do what they want, and they walk among us, they could be anyone. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And yeah, around this time, like around the time Cassie says that, she like explicitly draws out the connection we've been talking about like the thing the Yeerks are doing is harmful because they're the evil aliens doing it, but also just because they have their own agenda that requires clearing this forest, but it's important to not clear out the forest.
Yeah, Cassie has been pretty like mindful of the Yeerks and like what tangibly separates what they're doing from what the Yeerks are doing, and really again like internalizing and thinking and puzzling that out. More than once she's kind of rushed to the defense of the Yeerks, which I also strongly relate to. All I want in this world, I guess in the world of the Animorphs, is for the Yeerks to unionize. That's all. That's all I want is for them to unionize and get Visser 3 out of there. He's the worst boss imaginable. I am so thrilled that this has a conversation on what does make violence tangibly different, what is about, the intent and what have you. Another thing before starting this series is I really thought that the Yeerks were going to be a hive mind. And because they're not, and they're actual individual entities, there's such richness there to pull apart on like sentience and identity. And again, what we get here, like what makes a life more valuable than another. I'm really hoping that this book is not just exploring that theme on its own, but like setting up that theme to be consistent throughout the series. Like, I really think it's worthwhile for them to interrogate, like, what makes a human life more worthwhile than a Yeerk. We kind of have had discussions about that, and like largely for Cassie, it comes down to like consent, more or less, without saying it, but essentially the idea of consent. But I feel like there's so much more ways for this to get complicated. And I hope that this is going to be one of our like core themes in this series because I really love it.
The only Yeerk in this book is Visser 3.
Yeah.
The only one with like any attention paid to like who they are, what they do. Because like there are some other controllers around near the end, but they aren't really differentiated from like all the rest of their various goons.
Yeah, they're fully unnamed. And in this book, Visser 3 is like in all the way clown mode. So
yeah, exactly.
So chapter 7, Cassie comes home and her dad is being funny and being sweet and buttering her up because he's going to go make her get a hurt skunk. And she does not want to do it, but he says that she has a way with skunks. And in my classic fashion of loving every creature that is deeply unloved and maligned in society, I do love skunks. I was really excited for some skunk representation here. When I was in elementary school, I had a book that was like Animals of Arizona, and it went over like a bunch of different animals and it had pictures, and it had this picture of baby spotted skunks specifically, and they are so cute. They are so cute. And so in elementary school, when people would be like, I think that cats are cuter than dogs, and I think that dogs are cuter than cats, I would be like, actually, the cutest baby animal is a spotted skunk. And they'd be like, ew. And then I would take out my book and I would show them the picture, and without fail, they would be like, oh, you're right. That is that is a cute little guy, undeniably.
Oh, yeah. I can't immediately recall to mind what baby skunks look like. I think I was just sort of filling things in for the baby skunks that are really prominent in this book. But
yes.
Yeah, I totally believe you that they're incredibly adorable.
I'll send you this picture after this call. They're so cute. Of course, this book is about how like we should value life, regardless of aesthetic preferences. But I do still love that there is some skunk love in this book. So they find this skunk. She saves it pretty quick. She can immediately tell that this thing has been hit by a Dracon beam. So it is likely it's from over in the area with the logging station, which kind of sets up some groundwork for later on. In chapter 8, we have another classic Animorphs trip to the mall. They are trying to be really good about not appearing in a group altogether all the time. So Rachel and Cassie are walking around through the mall and talking about their plans as Rachel shops. They're talking about how they could possibly get into this logging station. They're all thinking like, okay, we got to do some kind of insect morph for sure. And Cassie is like, listen, I will not be an ant again. It's not happening. Do you remember the time that they were ants at all? Because if not, I will regale you.
I think that may have been one of the books I read, because that did spark something for me. Even said like, oh yeah, we morphed into ants, but we were the wrong kind of ants in the wrong colony, and they turned on us. And
yeah.
I do remember that, like, that was the thing I enjoyed and sort of retained from the Animorphs books I read, which is interesting facts about the animals they turn into.
Yeah. Yeah, I love all the little facts that they drop in. Like, one thing that I really liked about this chapter even was the dad reminds her that, because she's like, it's fine, I have a rabies shot, I don't need gloves or whatever. And he's like, rabies shots are not 100% effective. And like, thinking about that logically, sure, that makes sense. But I really never did consider that. That ant chapter, until we get some crazy shit in this book, that ant chapter was like hands down the most fucked up thing that I had read in like quite some time. And
I could
like,
completely imagine.
Right, and I read like horror for adults constantly, and nothing has stayed with me like the ants pulling all their limbs off, just the absolute carnage of it. It was so horrific.
I have a book in mind that reminds me a lot of the termite stuff in this.
Yeah.
If we want to sort of go straight to that.
Yeah, sure. Let's do that. So they're going to go in as termites, which one of them is like, a termite is basically an ant. And they're like, well, not really. And they're much more chill. So
they make sure they get a termite from around the cabin around the Yerk base, so they know it's the right kind, and they all like get its DNA right there in the mall from human X. And I just wrote a little note: today's gender is human X.
Today's gender is human X. Today's gender is just unspecified variable human, I suppose. I think that the one other thing that is important to mention before we get to termites is that this skunk had babies. And
it was also hurt by the Dracon beam.
Yes. So somewhere out there is a little like nest of skunk babies in a very dangerous area who also could die from just malnutrition, or predators, lots of other things. And Cassie cannot stop thinking about it. And she goes and she gets the mama skunk DNA, which is going to come in clutch later. So yeah, okay. So they get the termite. They get the termite DNA and just a very fucked up morphing sequence, as we typically do. Luckily, they're like blind when they morph, more or less. So very grateful for that I didn't have to experience a lot of like descriptions of things that would absolutely trigger my trypophobia. I was very grateful for that. We do get some, but not nearly as much as we could have. Very grateful. As they're flying there, she finds the babies through like predator instincts because she's in her bird morph as they travel there. But then we kind of just put a pin in that. She's like located them, but she's not going to address it right now. They're on a mission. And then they arrive and they are going to do a distraction. So outside,
it's Jake turning into a tiger, right?
Yes, it is Jake turning into a tiger. Thank you. And the rest of them go in as termites. And then, yeah, we get to chapter 12 and, oh my God. I jotted down this little intro passage where she says, I wanted to scream so badly, but I no longer had a voice. I no longer had a tongue. They are literally doing I have no mouth and I must scream.
Oh, yeah, totally. The old classic.
Yes, absolutely wild.
By another Star Trek writer, Harlan Ellison.
Oh, I actually had no idea. I'm not very Star Trek.
He wrote City on the Edge of Forever.
Oh, I do know that one. Wow. Whoa, whoa,
Yeah.
whoa, 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 whoa.
That is like kind of the secret to why Star Trek is like still enormous, because like not only was it written by like people with a ton of experience writing TV and like adapting sci-fi to that, but like they got a bunch of the greatest sci-fi writers working at that time to come in and do their own episodes.
I had no idea.
Norman Spinrad, who like, if I just like list off a bunch of 60s sci-fi writers, will you know what I'm talking about?
Some of them, yeah, definitely.
Yeah, like Norman Spinrad, Jerome Bixby,
Okay.
Richard Matheson.
Yeah.
Yeah. They all wrote Star Trek original series episodes.
What?
Yeah, Theodore Sturgeon wrote Amok Time.
What? No, I literally had no clue. And okay, so I am somebody who anymore, I am not interested in engaging with like media IPs and franchises in like the Hollywood sphere or TV. I'm not huge on adaptations right now. I'm marveled out. I'm like kind of sick of it. And as I've done this show, more people have told me that I would like Star Trek, which I've always heard. I've always heard it's super up my alley and that I just need to give it a shot and that I will appreciate it once I'm in it. And nobody has ever convinced me that I actually would like it. Like nobody has given me something where I'm like, oh, that's really interesting. Like that's a thing that I do want to check out. I think that you might have just convinced me that I actually do need to watch it.
Success. Talk about indoctrinating into the cult.
Yes, I guess it's about time. That's wild. I genuinely had never heard this, which is very funny. And also, hey, everyone who knows me very well personally and did not think that this would be my on-ramp, you are fools. You are fools.
And
of
like,
course.
I think I've gone up several levels in like the Galaxy Brain meme in terms of franchises and so on, because like, here's how I think about it. Like, let's use Star Trek as the example. The way I think about it is like Star Trek, like you have this pioneering 60s series with like one of the first Black female characters on TV, period. It's like so many pioneering things written by a bona fide futurist with serious principles and ideals and philosophies. And also all these episodes by these like great sci-fi writers of the time. So there's that thing and there's that show. And the way I feel about that is the way I feel about that. Then there's the Next Generation. That is basically my number one comfort show. It's like I grew up on that. Talk about DVDs you get from Netflix. I got so many of those. I grew up on it. It felt more adult to me when I was young than basically anything else I had seen, because like it's the 80s and early 90s. Everything's so beige, everything's so quiet. You have the constant calming hum of the ship in every scene. No one really raises their voice too much. Everyone works out their disagreements with a lot of civility. And there's that. And like, then there's Deep Space Nine, which like it's undergone this huge renaissance in terms of its fandom, as like basically all TV has become more and more like Deep Space Nine. And like the Star Trek fans watching it weren't into it when it came out.
Yeah.
And now that all of TV is a lot more like it, a lot of people who just like watch regular TV have come around to it. And then you have Voyager and Enterprise, Strange New Worlds, Discovery, Picard. Like, just think about the thing that's in front of you. Just think about the thing you're watching. I think that's how I approach franchises and so on now.
Yeah, I wish I could do the same. I feel like my problem is like I feel so cluttered by like all of my feeling. You know what I mean? Like all the pre-existing knowledge.
The sort of dirty secret is like, if it's good, then you can just like sit down and watch the thing or read the thing.
Oh, yeah.
Like Animorphs is a good example. I was put off by that. I felt like I had to start from book one. I had to know everything. And I have just completely abandoned that. And if I need to know something, then if it doesn't tell me, that's its problem, not mine.
I think you've made me come around to franchises too. What is going on?
Well, like, there are a lot of things that I think it has a big problem of it doesn't tell you the thing. It doesn't tell you everything you need to know.
Yeah. I think that I get so in my head about, like, I'm not going to enjoy this. I'm going to have the clutter of everything instead of just the thing in front of me. I think I genuinely kind of forgot that, like, if it's good, I'll just be paying attention to it and not the clutter. Thank you for that reminder. Wow.
Of course. Now let's dive back into the termite colony.
Yes. Yeah, now let's go back to the abject horror. Nevermorphed is hosted, edited, and produced by Will Williams. Our theme music is The Chase by Joey Hendricks. Our title is by Eddie Feely, and this podcast would not exist without Mike Schubert's podcast, Potterless and the Newest Olympian. You can find his works at shub.es, that's shub.es. Nevermorphed is a proud member of Hug House Productions. You can find more at hughouse.productions and follow us on Tumblr at Nevermorphed. Get morphin'! On March 27th, 2024, Elon Musk was deposed in a libel lawsuit filed by Ben Brody. Musk's lawyer, Alex Spiro, tried to retroactively mark the deposition as confidential, but it wasn't.
Of course I can ask him, do you think you committed actual malice? Do you think you were reckless? Of course I can ask those questions.
The deposition is a new Hug House podcast reenactment of the entire deposition, word by word, in full, taken very seriously.
Things that he did wrong.
But that's the point. That's not what you're allowed
Until he really just, like, can't anymore?
Not what you're allowed to do in the deposition. You can't just get him talking.
The deposition drops on the 4th of July, 2024, with 4 weekly episodes. Subscribe on your podcatcher of choice or find us at hughouse.productions today.